There we go. There we go. All right, it works. I wonder, was that just for educators, or could we all do it in a mixed crowd? Did y'all catch that right there? You ever seen the little meme where you get in the elevator and everybody's facing backwards? And you get in and you're like, so you just keep facing that way, knowing you ain't supposed to be doing that? So when you put your hands up, and the kids do the same thing, they look, okay, I'm gonna just put my hand up and be quiet, because that's what everybody else does. All right? So as you can see, I told them to leave that up in the green room. I was like, you gotta leave that 225 up, because we're way over, way over. And then maybe when I come out, they'll be like, it's 225, so I better go ahead and pay Ford so I can get out of here at 3. Hey. But you're not leaving at 3, because Mr. Ford's got something great outside that you're gonna want to see. All right, you're gonna want to see. All right, welcome back. I hope you are reinvigorated. I hope you have all the strategies and ideas to take back to your respective areas in this great state. But rounding out today, I'm pleased to welcome another state education leader, Senator Jay Chaudhuri. All right, come on out here. Come on in.
Oh, my state.
All right, y'all, we're gonna stay right here. We're gonna, this is what we call 9:15 this morning. All right, 9:15. All right, he is from Fayetteville Public Schools. He graduated from Davidson College, Columbia University School of International and Public Affairs, and North Carolina Central University School of Law with honors. All right, I think that's Eagle Pride in here.
Yeah.
There we go. Give him a round of applause. All right, but I do want to say one of his great friends that knew him from college, he has always fought for systemic change even in college. He led an effort to establish the first ever innovation fund, a $230 million fund dedicated to support and invest in businesses with significant operations in North Carolina. We had a lot of discussion about community and business partnerships today. He also played a leading role in the global information technology company, established an innovation hub that will create 2,000 new jobs and pay $72,000. You catch that? I'm a career academy school, trust me. These numbers matter. These numbers matter. $72,000 a year above the Wake County median salary. All right, it was one of the largest job announcements that was made in this state this past decade, y'all. He's minority whip, Democratic Party. I will say his love and his passion and who he endearly, his wife and his 2 children, but he also told me don't forget about his dog, the black lab. So please put your hands together. Put your hands together for the great Senator Chaudhuri. All right. All right. Oh, boy, either way, it's your thing.
It's like a late night show.
Right there. Creatures of habit. It's like putting that hand up, I will tell you. All right. I want to say welcome again. All right. And the theme for today's Innovation Lab is raising expectations for student success. We've heard a lot about expectations so far today, but I'd like to start our conversation by asking you, why are high expectations important for students? And why is it critical that all students get to experience a culture of high expectations?
Well, first, before I answer the question, let me thank you for moderating this discussion to Best NC. Thank you for the introduction. I was saying that might be the closest I ever come to coming onto a late night show. I feel like, and congratulations to you being Principal of the Year, which is an amazing and tremendous accomplishment. One of the things, a story that I tell before I served in the North Carolina State Senate, I had the opportunity to work for then Attorney General Roy Cooper and then the State Treasurer, as Tabari mentioned. And I decided to leave the Attorney General's office, as I told then Attorney General Cooper, for 3 reasons. I wanted to get out of my subject matter that I focused on. I wanted to get paid more money, which was not really the deciding factor, and I wanted management experience.
Okay.
And he shunned at the idea of management experience because it can be so difficult to manage people. But I share that story with you because ultimately when I served as the general counsel at the state treasurer and you manage a number of attorneys, you do a work plan and you establish expectations, right? And so from a private sector or public sector perspective, establishing expectations are important because if you don't establish those expectations, you don't have a benchmark of how your employees or your lawyers are going to perform. And as you and I were talking in the green room, it's the same thing with my 2 children. I have a middle schooler and elementary school son and middle school daughter. And we have tried to establish academic expectations for her and personal responsibility expectations, including making her bed in the morning. Now the incentive there is for her to get a cell phone at some point. But I think that those expectations, those concepts of expectations really apply to what we establish with our students. And if we don't establish high expectations, I think we fail both our most vulnerable students and our most accomplished students at the same time. And really, if you think about low expectations, I mean, low expectations really seed doubt. I think high expectations breeds confidence. And I think that we can establish that culture of expectations both through rigor and compassion.
Oh, okay. All right. Now, in right along with what you were just saying, what are your thoughts on high expectations relating to educational equity?
Well, I think they're absolutely tied together. As I mentioned, if we don't establish high expectations for our most vulnerable students, I think we end up seeding doubt, and we don't ask them to perform at the highest level. We've also seen this, and Best NC was very instrumental in looking at the number of students that came from low-income backgrounds that despite scoring high on their end of grade tests, actually were not allowed to go into an advanced math course in 8th grade. And as many of you all know, the empirical evidence shows that students that that take an advanced math course in 8th grade have a higher likelihood of going to college and succeeding. But that's an example of a policy passed that was in place where the legislature tried to remedy an issue that I think, frankly, did not that had educational inequities and did not really reward students based on low expectations, frankly.
Okay, all right. Now, right along with the legislature, how do you decide which education issues to tackle? Like, who do you look, or where do you look, or who do you look to help you make education policy decisions?
So, I think for educational policy decisions, obviously, being on the education committee, I'm in conversations with a number of policymakers and stakeholders around that issue. But I will tell you, I think there are two driving sources for me with my education policy. One is being a parent and a product of public schools. So one of the issues that really resonated with me deeply, as I mentioned, I have a son in elementary school. I don't know how many people here remember a couple of years ago, we experienced this so-called classroom chaos. I mean, it was particularly impactful in Wake County, I know for sure, but I know it was an issue all across the state. But just as quick background, there was a classroom size mandate that was to reduce classroom sizes, which is a good thing. I think most people would agree with that. But the problem is in many instances, there was no money attached to it. And so as a result, you had a lot of specialist teachers, including art, music, and physical education teachers that were going to be out of a job. And probably the most impactful experience that I had is I saw my son's art teacher. It was his favorite subject, and she looked me in the eyes with tears in her eyes saying that she was fearful of losing her job. And getting that kind of feedback really led me to to champion the idea that we needed to either provide money in the reduction of K-3 classrooms or seek a waiver for those schools that couldn't afford to pay for it. That was about a 1.5 year long battle, but that was something that was really driven from personal experience. The other thing that I would say, the other source for me in ideas is this notion, and you were talking about Career Academy, is a real fundamental belief that I have, and I think has been a real tradition here in the state of North Carolina, that education is economic development.
That's right.
And I think when we talk about rethinking education, we got to think about growing and building the next generation of workers. But as you mentioned in my introduction, I had the opportunity to recruit an information global technology firm here to Wake County that frankly doesn't necessarily see a college degree as the best way to train their workers, which I think is something that we have to dispel of as a notion that you always have to go to college to make the highest salary. But that really led me to think about the fact that we need to think about education as a way of growing the next generation of workers. And so for me, focusing on those issues is important. As an example, during my first term, I passed with partnering with a Republican in the Senate a Computer Science for All bill that was designed to basically set out a strategy for how we can better improve computer science education. When I was touring a 3D manufacturing plant here, which is about 10, 15 minutes north of here, the CEO of that company told me that they couldn't fill a vacancy that paid $80,000 that required an associate's degree for a position they had. So I think there's a real opportunity for us to try to match the supply side of education, the education that we give to these students with what the demand is out there in the workforce.
Okay. All right. Well, we have such a great audience. There's so many great minds out here. I want to hold my last question, but I want to give someone in the audience a chance to ask a question so we don't all get up here and monopolize this opportunity as, we're supposed to remove barriers to opportunity, right? Well, I'm removing the barrier for y'all to participate. All right? So, will there be one? Please speak into the mic. Don't forget to hold the button. All right, hold the button for the record. All right, right here in the front.
Robert Smith from UNC Wilmington. Senator Chaudhuri, you mentioned in your introduction about your support for innovation in terms of funding. And I'm curious, in your role in education, what opportunities you would see in terms of supporting innovation and whether particular funding for innovative programs or schools. And going back as we remember charter schools, they were originally intended to be the sort of innovative schools that would help inform our traditional public schools. That no longer seems to be the case. So from your point of view, how important is innovation to you, and should we be doing more to support innovative approaches in public schools?
Look, I think that's a really good question, and from my personal perspective, yes, I would love to see us focus on innovation in education. I feel like in some instances we do that tinkering around the edges where we have bipartisan support. As an example, I mean, this may not be innovative, but we haven't done it. Senator Rick Horner, who I know was here earlier, he and I worked on a bill together where we passed a bill that actually allowed veteran teachers to come back into the neediest schools and hard to staff subject matter areas, which may not sound innovative, but I mean, it's been done in other states. We haven't done it. I think it's kind of a common sense idea. But the fact of the matter is, to be completely honest with you, I think at the highest levels, I mean, both parties have real differences in how we tackle education. And I think as you know, from the Democratic perspective, there are real issues raised about charter schools, for example. There are real issues that are raised about vouchers. From the other side of the aisle, they have real questions about whether parts of our public education system work. And I just don't feel like we have the environment to truly experiment in public education because we are actually fighting over what I would argue are fundamental issues. But if there is a way to bring us together to focus on those issues, I'd welcome it. I mean, there is work that is happening across the aisle, but I would say that most of what is happening is not dramatic or big ideas in maybe the sense that you're thinking about.
Okay, so Senator, all right, you have a magic wand right now. All right, because if we don't believe it, we can't achieve it, as we tell the babies, okay? So We're going to tell our legislators the same thing. Sometimes we have to have a vision to get to see where we want to go, and then we kind of reverse engineer to get there.
Yep.
All right, so if you, in 5 years, what headline would you like to see regarding education in this great state of North Carolina?
In 5 years?
In 5 years, you got 5. Not 10.
All right. If I want to be realistic about it in 5 years, and this is part of why I would say, while it's important to have innovation, I really feel like there's some low-hanging fruit in education that we need to tackle. So if I had to give you my 5-year headline, that would be that all North Carolina children have access to high-quality early childhood education.
I love it. Beautiful.
And from my perspective, I think it's just about whether we have the political will. I think any educator that is here in the room knows the impact of having early childhood education. Look, the good news for North Carolina is that we have high quality early childhood education, and we rank very high on that. The bad news is we're seeing the access rates of early childhood education is really low. 23% of North Carolina children that need to have access to high early childhood education, we don't. And just as an ancillary to that, which I will tell you is very enlightening for me as a parent. My daughter last week came to me and said that there was a Hispanic American classmate of hers who did not even have lunch with her. And this morning, in fact, she packed a lunch to give to this child. At the middle school where we attend, there's actually a food ark. It is the only food ark in Wake County, which is essentially a pantry of food that children can take and take home to them. But I will tell you, when we talk about education and we talk about equity, we can't talk about this issue without talking about poverty and the fact that we have, if anybody saw the Annie E. Casey Foundation study that came out yesterday or earlier this week, it said that we have 11% of children that come from high poverty neighborhoods. I mean, unless we address the fact that our children come to school hungry and we address poverty, I mean, it is very tough to tackle the issue of education without looking at it through that lens.
A lot of great minds will say you must Maslow before you can bloom, correct?
That's right.
All right, I'm gonna tell you that. Feed the kids, Julie Pippin. All right. Well, during this past session, you have intentionally reached out across the aisle to work in a bipartisan way to keep key educational issues afloat. Why do you think it is so important to show that education solutions can be achieved through bipartisan strategies?
You know, I talked about the differences that both parties have, but I still think at the end of the day, I truly believe when we talk about establishing culture and excellence, I think both parties strive to achieve that. And look, I've had real dramatic differences with my friends across the aisle, but I think where there's an opportunity to move us forward, I have tried to do that largely based on the fact that I believe that each of the colleagues that I serve with in the state Senate ultimately have the best motives and intent in what they want for our children in North Carolina. I just think we have a real difference in how to achieve it.
Oh, okay. All right. Same ambition. Okay. All right. Now, as we conclude, I want you, instead of asking you a question, I just want you to elaborate on something that you want to touch on to bring us home.
Yeah, one thing that I'll just close with is this idea. I mean, we've talked about the cradle aspect and the importance of early childhood education. I mean, on the other side is the career aspect of it,
right.
And I think the importance for us to rethink how we provide education to our children to make sure that they have the skills to take a 21st century job. You know, there is this notion that automation is something that's going to put people out of business, and that's always been, I think, a challenge and debate that we have had in this country. But I always loved the vision that Governor Jim Hunt had, which is essentially you've got to create a new generation of workers that can be on the right side of automation and not on the wrong side of automation, and that means we've got to have workers that have the knowledge and the ability to function in that economy. And I really think that public schools and middle schools and high schools play a really important part in that. I mean, if you survey most millennials, if you've looked at surveys, a lot of them actually don't have. They don't believe that a college degree is the way to succeed, and that largely may be driven through the increase in college debt that we see students incurring. But that just puts additional pressure, I think, on our public education system, which also becomes an equity issue for us to make sure that we are training and skilling up our students to be ready to take those jobs.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, that has been, what a ride.
No, thank you.
What a ride. We covered a lot of topics in that quick minute. They even shaved 2 minutes on us. All right. But audience, please put your hands together for Senator Jay Chaudhuri.
Thank you.
I got it.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
They got a good hot back.
Okay.
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 They got a good